So to start off, I always like to take a step back and to talk about publishing in general. I think a lot of people, first off, I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of publishing as a career path. A lot of people love to read, but I don't think a lot of people think about really the intricacies behind that. And then also, how broad the industry is. There really are a wide variety of different types of publishers. What I always tell people is there really is something for everyone, no matter what you study, no matter what you're interested in, no matter what you read, there is a way to kind of pair that with roles in publishing. So you'll see on this slide here the different types of publishers that there are. So Hachette Book Group falls underneath the trade umbrella. So when we talk about trade publishing, we're talking about general fiction and nonfiction, a lot of things you guys might read it in your leisure. And so there's traditionally been, the big five, and so the five largest publishers that publish widely across the board in the trade arena. So you may be familiar with some of these names, but we have Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, which we are the fourth largest, and then Macmillan. But you'll see on the slide here that there are also academic publishers that publish, different textbooks and things you might use in your college classes. There are independent publishers that publish widely in both the trade and the academic space. There are specialized technical publishers like McGraw-Hill and a variety of other journals and different, entities that work on a variety of different types of books. And like I said, yeah, really something for everyone. And then I really like this diagram on this next slide here because I think it really gives you an idea of the breadth of roles in publishing. So there are so many different opportunities. A lot of people that work in publishing, tend to come from an English background in terms of what they study in school, but it's certainly not the only thing. I study business, Leah studies psychology. There are people that study, a wide variety of different, academic disciplines and then end up in publishing. And I think that's because of how broad our roles are. So you'll see on this slide here in the middle of the diagram that there are a lot of corporate functions in publishing. So if you are someone who is interested in marketing strategy or sales or corporate communications or even something from an operations standpoint, or if you're studying legal or finance, HR, IT, there really is something for, all of those different academic disciplines. Really the one common thing that brings us all together is really a love of books and reading and wanting to be, part of such a creative environment. And then you'll see on the outer slides of this diagram, a lot of other, specific publishing functions. So you have your editorial department that's responsible for actually acquiring and editing the books that we publish, that work with our authors. We have our publicity team, which you'll learn a little bit more about today, but they really connect our books with the media and to the world. We have marketing that oversees a variety of different initiatives that connects readers through social media and advertising. We have a rights team that sells the rights of our books to international publishers. We have a production team that actually oversees the physical transformation of our books. We have a design team that designs all of the covers and interiors of all of our different titles. So there really are so many different broad, different paths and ways that you can work in the industry. And so Leah in a second will tell you a little bit about Hachette and how that works. So we do have a variety of different publishing divisions, and they each almost function as their own mini companies and have their own editorial, marketing, publicity, art teams. And a lot of times people will gravitate to different roles depending on what kind of books they're interested in working on. So she'll tell you a little bit more about that.
So as Ashley mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit more about HBG in particular. So to start off, our mission statement is short and sweet. It's to publish great books well. Our vision statement expands upon that. We want to be the #1 destination for our authors, our agents, our client publishers. We want to be a respected publisher that's forward thinking, anticipates and fosters change and creativity, both at our company, but also in the industry as well. And then just to learn a little bit more about HBG. So we're the 4th largest company among US publishers, and we're actually a division of Hachette Livre, which is the 3rd largest trade and educational book publisher in the world, a division of Lagardère, which is a large French media company. Hachette Livre has 4 key businesses: HBG, which is us, Hachette Livre based in France, Hachette UK, and Hachette España. And those 4 businesses together produce a total of 17,000 books annually. We have around 1,300 employees across 8 locations. Obviously, right now we're all working from home, but when we are not in a pandemic, we have 8 locations and offices. Our headquarters and our largest office is our New York office, where we have around 500 employees. Our 2nd largest office is our Boston office. We have our distribution center out in Lebanon, Indiana. We have around 40 employees in our Nashville, Philly, Berkeley, and Boulder offices, and then around 8 employees in our Toronto office, and then field reps throughout the US. We have 7 publishing divisions, which I'll speak a little bit more about what types of genres they publish, but they're Grand Central Publishing, Little Brown Books for Young Readers, Perseus Books, Hachette Nashville, Orbit, and Hachette Audio. And as Ashley mentioned, each of these divisions kind of function as like their own mini company. We have a high ratio of bestsellers to books published, which is consistently industry leading and definitely something we're really proud of. And we ship over 200 million books per year from our distribution center, which is an incredibly large number. And the distribution team did a great job at ensuring that our books were still able to reach our clients even during the pandemic. Another area of our business is that we are the #1 provider of distribution services to US trade publishers. So I'll speak a little bit more about that later on, but we have some clients that we get to work with, including Disney, Chronicle, Abrams, and many other publishers. This is just a slide that includes some of our best-selling authors. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these authors as well. We have many more, but these are just a few of them. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have 7 publishing divisions, and I'll go into a little more detail about what they publish. The first is Grand Central Publishing, and they publish some authors like David Baldacci, Nicholas Sparks, Harlan Coben, Nicholas Sparks, I might have just mentioned him, many others as well. And they publish both fiction and nonfiction, more in the commercial sphere. They have a number of sub-imprints, and a theme in publishing is that we have this overarching publishing division, and then we'll have sub-imprints that kind of focus on more specific genres. So Forever and Forever Yours is our romance sub-imprint, a very personal fan of mine. We have 12 that publishes 12 books a year, more in the political sphere. We have Vision as well. Then we have Little Brown, and Little Brown is one of the oldest imprints, founded in 1837. Little Brown is also home to the world's #1 best-selling author, James Patterson. Some of their other authors include Ellen Hilderbrand, David Sedaris, Michael Connelly, many more. Little Brown also publishes both fiction and nonfiction titles, again, more in the commercial sphere. And they also have a number of sub-imprints, including Mulholland Books, which publishes crime and thriller novels, Voracious, which is a fairly new imprint that publishes a wide range of illustrative titles, mostly nonfiction. We also have Jimmy Patterson, which is James Patterson's middle grade and children's books. We have LB Spark, which publishes lifestyle and health, and many more. Then we have Perseus Books. So Perseus Books we acquired not too long ago, and it's a nonfiction imprint, and they publish 500 nonfiction titles a year under 5 sub-imprints. So we have Avalon Travel, which is the imprint based in our Berkeley office, and they publish the Rick Steves and Moon Travel series. We have Basic Books, Hachette Books, and Public Affairs, and they're based in our New York office. They publish mostly in our New York office, and they publish nonfiction titles from academic research, investigative journalism, anything in between. And then we have Running Press, which is based in our Philly office, and they publish a broad range of lifestyle and pop culture titles. They also produce the Running Press miniature editions, which is the little red guy at the end. They're these really cute kits. Sometimes they're magnets. I have a Tequila Mockingbird like drinks kit. It's really adorable. And I love it. My fridge is covered in the magnets. Then we have LBYR, which is our children's imprint. And LBYR publishes diverse titles across all ages. LBYR is also home to Stephenie Meyer's Twilight Saga, which sold over 100 million copies globally. And she also published the 4th book to the Saga series in the summer. LBYR also has had great success in their licensing program. And I mean, we've seen explosive growth, and our licensing program allows us to work with different games, shows, movies to publish books. So Fortnite is an incredible example of that. There we go. Okay, then we have Hachette Nashville. Hachette Nashville is our imprint based in our Nashville office. Hachette Nashville has sold over 90 million books since 2001. Some of their authors include Joyce Meyer, Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, and many more. Hachette Nashville has 3 sub-imprints, including Center Street, which publishes nonfiction conservative politics, Faith Words, which publishes in the Christian inspirational market. And then we have Worthy Books, which we also acquired not too long ago, and they publish inspirational adults and children's books, both fiction and nonfiction. Then we have Orbit, and Orbit is our science fiction and fantasy imprint, and it's the most successful sci-fi and fantasy imprint launched in the US in the last 20 years. So definitely something we're really proud of. They have some wonderful authors like N.K. Jemisin, Brent Weeks. They also published the Witcher series, which was made into a Netflix show pretty recently, and it's really popular now. So definitely something that we're proud of and an imprint that keeps on growing. Then we have Hachette Audio. So audio has seen explosive growth both in the industry and at HBG. Usually when we are in our New York office, we have three studios where you can kind of where you can listen to actors or authors read for their titles. They have like headphones outside of the studios that you can put them on and listen. It's really cool. And our audio team has been nominated for a total of 24 Grammys, and we've had 9 wins, which is really exciting for us. And I think audio is just a great way to get our books out to so many other people as well. And then, as I mentioned, we have our client services. So we're the #1 provider for distribution services, and it's a great additional revenue stream for us. It allows us to work with clients and provide different support, sometimes sales support, distribution support, sometimes it's audio support. And we work with some great clients, including Abrams, Quirkus, Marvel, National Geographic, Lonely Planet, and you'll see on the bottom just some of the titles that they publish that we get to work on.
And then just to talk a little bit more about life at HBG and some of the things that we love as employees here. As I said before, we're all avid readers, so we have access to a lot of our great content through our online lending library called Holly, where you can download our published ebooks and most of our audiobooks for free. We also have a pretty steep staff discount, and we do a lot of fun programs throughout the year where you get free books and access to our titles. We also do a lot of fun events. We also do a lot of training and development opportunities. I always think it's exciting to be able to learn about the roles that we talked about at HBG and to really meet staff. So we do kids days, we do different holiday parties and gatherings when we are in the office. A lot of that has now been virtual over the last year. We do a publishing curriculum, which is a series of seminars that we offer to let people learn about our business. We have a really great mentoring program. We have a lot of philanthropy opportunities. We do a company-wide day of service that we're going to do virtual this year. So you'll see at the bottom of the slide here some pictures from some recent events for when we were able to all be together. But yeah, it's a very collaborative and creative company that, that's very, very passion driven. People are here because they want to be. And then one of the other things that's really, really important to us is diversity and inclusion. It's so important for everyone to feel like they are reflected in the pages of our books and for our staff to feel like they're part of an inclusive company. We do have a very active diversity advisory group that has 3 subcommittees. So I actually oversee our recruitment subcommittee that works to create relationships with other organizations and really just help people learn about publishing because, not every school has a publishing program. The industry doesn't always feel accessible to everyone. So we want to be able to educate people about roles in the industry. So really excited to be chatting with you guys today. And then one of the things I wanted to highlight for you guys is our internship program. So we do hire interns every fall, spring, and summer, the bulk of them being in the summer. We offer a pretty robust summer internship program that allows our interns to really learn a lot about the business, to work with staff, to complete lots of hands-on work, but then to also really explore if this is what they want to do long-term. I think this is a great way to try something before you commit to a role after graduation. Our internship typically runs for 10 weeks. It starts in early June and then through mid-August. Interns typically work 28 hours a week, which is usually broken out across Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5, and it is paid. All of our internships this summer will be remote because of everything going on. So I think it's also a great way for people to not have to be in New York to work with us this summer. We do have a variety of openings on our career site, and we can send this presentation out afterwards, but you can have the link to the career site there. But we have openings in departments like editorial, marketing, and publicity. We have an opening in sales. We've seen other openings across departments like production or audio or communications. I would say so far, because it being mid-March at this point, we've filled probably about half of our intern spots, but we do have some openings still posted on our career site. So definitely take a look if you're interested. In addition to the work that you do in your department, our internship also offers weekly education sessions. It's so similar to that publishing curriculum that I mentioned before. It's a series of seminars where you'll learn a little bit more about our business, and it's for all of the interns. They'll come together virtually to hear from staff. So it's a great way to learn, to meet everyone, to network, and just to continue to feel like you're involved in the business. And then just some FAQs, some questions we typically get. So obviously you do not need to be an English major to work in publishing. I think there are so many roles for people from all different, academic disciplines and backgrounds. In terms of what we look for, I would say cover letter is really important to us because, as I mentioned, it's such a passion-driven and creative company. So we really want people that want to work for us. So we do look for people that say, I love books and reading. I was a kid that was reading books underneath the covers after bedtime growing up, things like that. Things like that really do appeal to us because that's how we feel. That's why we work here. In terms of what kind of experience we look for, we'll talk about it a little bit in a little bit more detail in a minute. But you do not have to have previous publishing experience. Some of the things that we typically see might be someone that works for an on-campus reading and writing center. It might be someone that supports your campus newspaper or journal or literary magazine, or maybe you worked in a bookstore. So any kind of demonstrated, love of reading and writing is great, but we also look for transferable skills. So maybe you did a marketing internship at a startup last summer and you want to apply those social media skills, or maybe you work as a publicity chair for an organization on campus and now you want to, bring those skills to a role at HBG. That's completely great. And then in terms of dates and deadlines, we do hire interns on a rolling basis, so there's not a firm deadline, though I would say we probably hope to wrap recruitment in the next month. So if you are interested in applying, I would try to apply within the next, week or so. And there's a link to our career site.
Okay, now I'm going to just talk a little bit about some resumes, do's and don'ts. So I think it's really important to keep it to one page where you can. I think they say that recruiters look at resumes for like 3 seconds. So it's really important to have all the most important and relevant information on that one page. I think, of course, if you've been working for years and years and years, you have tons of experience, it obviously will go on to another page. But I think if you're in college or a recent graduate, you should definitely be able to keep it to one page. I think another thing that you can do is use LinkedIn as an expanded version of your resume. We definitely suggest, if you have a LinkedIn account, to include it on your resume, and you can use your LinkedIn to add all of those experiences that you might not get to put on your resume. It's really important to include all relevant contact information. So have your address, your phone number, your email. Ashley and I have both had experiences when we go to call a candidate and there's no phone number, and it can be really frustrating. Have your education, your GPA if you'd like. Your work experience is obviously the meat of your resume, and that's going to be in the middle. And then you can include any on-campus leadership experience. So if we want to see well-rounded candidates. So if you volunteer at a nonprofit or you do other things, you can definitely include that and tell us a little bit more about yourself. Any volunteer work, anything like that. And then for your work experience, I think it's something that you could play around with is using multiple categories. So if you want to put relevant work experience and other work experience as 2 different sections, the purpose of this is if, let's say, you're applying for a marketing assistant role and you had a marketing internship previously, but right now you're working as a server at a restaurant. Usually the server experience will be the first thing that you would include on your resume because chronologically that's what you're currently doing. But if you want to include the most relevant work experience as the first thing that recruiters see and something that's above the fold, you would use these different categories so that the relevant work experience or your marketing internship will be the first thing recruiters see. And then under other work experience, that is where you can put what you're currently doing, which is working as a server at a restaurant. So that's something that you can always play around with and think about. Then again, at the end of your resume, you'll have like a skills section, and that's where you can highlight any technical proficiencies. So if you have experience in Microsoft Office or Excel, InDesign, Photoshop, anything like that, includes social media experience. That's where you put that at the end of your resume. Something that we also like to say is that you can experiment with colors and fonts and have some fun. We are a creative industry. I always think it's really great when I see a resume that's a little different. It kind of breaks up the monotony of looking at black and white resumes over and over again. And off the bat, you've already set yourself apart from other candidates, and all you've really done is change the color. I would say you want to be careful. You don't want it to be too colorful, and you want to make sure that someone can read it on a computer or on print paper. I think I had someone who had like this light pink, and I think it was meant to be really beautiful, but it was really hard to read anything, and I just couldn't read what was on the resume, which was a shame. So definitely play around. You can experiment with any fonts and colors. And then you should try and show qualitative or quantitative data whenever you can in your work experience section. So if, again, let's say we're going with the marketing example, you had a marketing internship and you ran someone's social media list, tell us what types of social media. Did you run their Twitter? Did you run their Instagram? Did you increase engagement? If so, by how much percent did you increase it? Did you increase the followers? Anything like that. Try and be as specific as you can. I think it's really a great way to highlight your skills and what you've done and what you contributed to the company that you worked at. Ashley touched upon this before, but as we mentioned, we do not need previous publishing experience. And that I think a lot of people discount some experience that they think might not be important. And I think that's a big shame. A lot of our internships and entry-level roles require admin work. So if you worked at an office or anywhere, maybe you worked at like a success center at college, include that on your resume. Tell us that you've interacted with students or customers or anything like that. I think a lot of people also discount retail or food service industry experience, and it's something that people do look for. I think you gain a lot of transferable skills from those experiences, and it's important to include that because it is something that we look for. Don't forget to spell check. I think it's really important. I've had hiring managers not want to move forward with a candidate because something was spelled incorrectly. So look it over multiple times, make sure there's no double words, make sure it's all nice and correct. We see a lot of objectives on the top of a resume. There's no need to include that. Space is really limited on resumes. We already know that you want the job, so you can just get rid of the objective and use the space for your work experience. Again, it's important to emphasize your past responsibilities. Try and be accomplishment driven whenever you can. Include the quantitative data. I think it's that more impactful for the recruiter to read that resume. Similar to the objective, you do not have to list your references. Again, save your space for other important things. If we need your references, we'll reach out and ask. Don't attempt a one-size-fits-all approach. I like to say that people should look at the job description when they're working on their application materials. We work really hard with a hiring manager to craft those, and it's really important. So it's important to also tailor your resume and cover letter to the role that you're applying for. Look at what we're looking for. Look at the responsibilities of the position. Have you done anything like that? And how can you highlight that in your resume or your cover letter? And again, don't leave off any important information and don't include any incorrect information. Reviewing is really important.
Right. And then just to talk a second about cover letters before I introduce Stephanie and Ivy to talk a little bit more about their experiences. I just wanted to, again, mention, that we really do value cover letters as part of the process. It really gives you an opportunity to convey, why you're passionate about this company, why you're interested in this position. We do, just like any other big company, get hundreds of applications for open jobs, and especially for people that are just starting out in their career, their resumes do tend to look pretty similar. So your cover letter is really your opportunity to differentiate yourself. It allows you to expand upon your resume and your accomplishments to really tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you're most proud of. I think most importantly, your cover letter is ultimately a writing sample. Most of our job descriptions ask for strong communication skills, so it's really your first opportunity to show us how you communicate and how you can talk about your experience. Also allows you to explain any kind of confusing gaps or details. If there's anything you think we might have a hesitation about, it allows you to explain that head on. I think that comes up a lot, even what location. So, you might be in Texas, but the job opening might be in New York, back when the world does stabilize, and you can tell us in your cover letter, while I'm in Texas, I'm happy to relocate to New York upon receiving a job offer. So if we had a question about that, that's now answered already. So it really allows you to think strategically about how to address any potential issues you think might come up. I recommend that your cover letter, have a conversational tone, but still be a professional document. So I think you can say, dear HR team at Hachette Book Group. I get a lot of messages from candidates asking who they should address their cover letter to. I don't think it's super important to go crazy and figure out who the manager is. I think if you're addressing it to the company, that's fine. You do not have to restate everything on your resume. I think that's my biggest suggestion. You really just want to talk about the highlights that relate to that role. So maybe in your spare time, you are a ceramics teacher, which is great, but then you might have also done other social media work that relates to that marketing assistant role that you're applying for. So I would just think about that. You do not have to tell us everything. We have that information on your resume. I'll see a lot of candidates start their cover letter by saying, my name is blank. I am graduating on May 30th at this school, studying all of these things. I found this job on Indeed.com. We have all of that information already. I would save the space and really just talk about why you want this job and what experience you have that you can bring to the role. So I recommend like a 3-paragraph format. Your first paragraph can really emphasize why you're passionate about this position, and then it can talk about, the specifics of the job posting. So if you're applying for a job posting in publishing that talks about romance books, you might want to talk a little bit about what interests you in romance publishing. And then in your second paragraph, you want to talk about your work experience, but again, as related to the job description. You don't have to talk about everything. You just want to highlight what you think is relevant based on what we're asking for in the posting. So, again, if you're a skydiving instructor, that's great, but that might not relate as much to the role unless you want to say that through that experience, you've learned how to multitask or whatever the case may be. You want to relate it again back to the job. And then you just can have a brief conclusion, summarizing your experience and reminding us, what makes you unique. So I recommend like 3/4 of a page. You don't have to go crazy, but I think really having that cover letter, really, taking that time to communicate with us through the process is really, really important. Awesome. And now to introduce our speakers. So we'll start with our, first question. So I'll just call on each of you. And then if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about how you found your way into your role at Hachette and your career thus far, that would be great. And if you want to tell us, what you studied at Furman, what other roles you've held, when you knew you wanted to work in publishing, whatever you want to share, that would be fantastic. Stephanie, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to. I love that Ivy's and my photos are both like in front of a nice little floral background, obviously in the pre-COVID times. My name is Stephanie. I was the class of 2014. I broke into publishing. To be honest, I kind of stumbled into it. It was a little bit of, complaining aggressively to my friends that I wanted to be in publishing. After I graduated, I did a 1-year program at the City University of London for creative writing and publishing. And when I came back, I was sort of struggling to find a job in publishing. And after, talking to several friends, one of my close friends put me in touch with somebody she knew who worked at Random House. And that's how I stumbled into publicity. I thought that I wanted to do editorial, but once I got into publicity, initially I had thought that that would be my foot in the door and I can always switch departments if I want to, but I realized that I loved it and I was good at it. And what did I study? I was an English major. Dr. Oakes was one of my professors. Hi, miss you. And I mean, in addition to just the things that we read, I also had a class with, oh my gosh, the name completely flew out of my head, but I took a nonfiction class where I sort of realized like, books don't have to be just the classics. It doesn't have to be just your Jodi Picoult or your Ellen Hildebrand. A book can be about anything. A book can completely open your world. And when I did my grad school program, that's when I realized that I loved the idea of the behind the scenes and I loved the idea of bringing books into the world. I have been in publicity since I was an assistant and I love interacting with media. I love my colleagues are all so extroverted and they're all so passionate about what they do. And they're also aware of what's happening in the world and what's happening in the media. And the way that you sort of craft your pitches and stuff to fit the current moment, whatever that may mean. And the way that we sort of, despite, the pandemic, people are still working with media to bring some joy and bring some reading into people's lives. It's great. I didn't really realize that I wanted to work with books until I sort of was at Furman in my grad school program. And that's when I realized that this was a thing that I could do for a living. And that combined with everything that sort of happened during the pandemic was just, this books just make people so happy. It just brings so much joy to people's lives.
Absolutely. Ivy?
I think you might be muted.
maybe, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, for some reason, Zoom does not like my headphones, and it's been a problem for a while. Anyways, we'll do this without headphones. My roommates can listen in on this. But I was saying, unlike Stephanie, I did want to go into publishing from the very beginning. So I went to Furman going, I'm going to do an English major and I'm going to publishing right after. I was pretty like steadfast on that. But I actually didn't go straight into publishing. I actually went and taught English for 2 years before. But when I came back, it was kind of like I didn't really know where to start. It had been like the job industry was just so wild. And so I started off like what most people do. I applied everywhere. I think I had like 60 plus applications at different places. And I'm not gonna lie, Leah, I'm sorry. The first couple, like 20, were pretty much the same for every job. And as I continued applying and getting advice from people, I was learning, oh, I should tailor these a little bit more. So they got better. My last like 20 applications were a lot better than the first 20. But I studied English. I also double majored in Asian studies because why not? But I, like Stephanie, just adore reading. I think anyone who goes into publishing, you have to love books. We are clearly not in it for the money. We're doing it because we want to bring great books out into the world. And I kind of thought when I went into publishing that I would want to do editorial. I think a lot of people do when they think of publishing, they think editorial is the only thing out there. But like Leah and Ashley have said, there are so many opportunities and so many departments within publishing. Like, I don't think you understand, one book takes 100 people. So you can be 100 people to get out there. So you can be any part of that. I am in publicity, and my job is just basically to make sure every single title that we have gets the biggest splash that we can possibly get for it in media and news. But yeah, just like a brief overview.
We'll go on to our next question. So if you guys can tell us a little bit more about your current role, that would be great. What your day-to-day might look like, what kind of longer-term projects that you focus on, maybe the size of your team, any kind of insight that you want to share in regards to that would be great. Stephanie, do you want to go?
Sure. My day-to-day, and Ivy can probably say the same thing, there is no day-to-day. It sort of depends on the timing of your project. So when you're about a month out, you're working on a month out from publication, you're working on press releases. You're aggressively pitching media and telling them like, hey, my book, we just received finished copies of this book. You're talking to people across broadcast and like digital, like your Forbes.com, your Cosmopolitan.com, and print and podcast and radio. I do a lot of deep dives on the internet that sometimes leads me to like the Wikipedia rabbit hole, like who's the producer for this, who's the best editor for that, and it leads to sort of doing a lot of Twitter is actually like incredibly helpful. So there's a whole lot of like diving down the rabbit hole to finding the person who would really love to read your book and someone who could write a really great article about it. There's a lot of like sending emails. There's sometimes taking meetings with indie bookstores to pitch your titles. There's taking meetings with media contacts to talk about what's on your summer 2021 list. Quarterly, we do meetings where we talk about the titles a year in advance. So that's where we sort of learn what's coming out a year in advance, and you start crafting ideas already. And the day-to-day really sort of changes. It depends on the timing. It also depends on, what's happening today, what's happening in the news. I work really closely with the marketing team because marketing and publicity tend to sort of bleed very closely to each other. The way it was explained to me once was marketing is more paid advertising. They sort of do the social media, your Facebook advertising, newsletters, etc. And publicity is more of the earned media where you pitch journalists, and those are the closer relationships. Also, obviously, editorial. One of the first things that we do as publicists is to usually sit down with the editor and say, what are your hopes and dreams and expectations for this project? Like, where would you read about this book? Would you read about this book in a book roundup like in Cosmopolitan, or would you read about it in The Atlantic or The New Yorker? I see a question from Mackenzie. I interact with a lot of people outside of my company. Some people like sub-rights will interact a lot with agents and stuff. Some people like production will do a lot of some more internal things. With people outside of the office, but within the company, I think that speaks more to like the company culture, which actually Hachette is really great about doing like company activities and keeping everyone in contact with each other. And I lost my train of thought, so I'll pass it over to Ivy.
Okay, awesome. Let me just reread this question really quick. Okay, so like Stephanie, I'm also in publicity, and yes, our day-to-day changes every single day because we work on multiple titles at one time, like 3 to 4 at once, and every single book is at a different stage. So if it's a later stage for a title, we're probably wrapping up interviews or scheduling a tour. Or if it's the beginning of a beginning part of a campaign, we're probably compiling who's the best kind of people to reach out to regarding this book. So every day is completely different. Pre-COVID, in-person events were a thing. Don't know where those are anymore. Where a big part of our job was literally getting our author on the road and touring like 4 or 5 cities and all the media and interviews that they would have in each city, and then the bookstore, and just organizing all of that. So much going on during those periods. And I miss those days. Those were like the fun adrenaline, like it's 7 o'clock when I'm on the phone with a hotel because my author isn't happy days. But I'm sure those will come back eventually. So yeah, my day-to-day is always so crazy, but it's what keeps it exciting. It's never boring. Let's see what else. So yeah, we do work very closely with editorial and marketing. Those are the two I would say I work most closely with. Editorial because it's their baby. So we have to go to them and like say, what is it that you want for this book? And then we also need them for all the materials, and just every time we get a review or an interview, like we always send that to loop that in with the editor saying, this is what we have going on for your book right now. And then marketing, like Stephanie said, marketing and publicity work very closely. Both of our goals is the same, which is to make the biggest splash possible for a title. So I've always heard it as we're 2 paddles in the same boat. We're going the same direction. We're just like doing different things. And so we work closely with marketing just to make sure that we don't leave any stone unturned, that we're hitting all the targets and all the media outlets that we want. Let's see, what else was there? I think the structure of my department, I report to 2 managers currently, and I'm a publicity assistant most often time. And honestly, for all of publishing, wherever you enter in, you're gonna come in grounds in, because this is definitely a hands-on kind of job where you have to learn each step to progress. You can't just dive in and become an editor right off the bat. You're not gonna know how anything works. So yeah, you come in as an assistant, and you're gonna do mostly admin things at the beginning, and there's learning the way of the company, the shape of everything, and just what the process is like for a book to get published. And then as time goes on, usually by your 2nd year, you'll start getting like added onto projects. You'll be taking over some of the other roles and other duties. And I think usually you see an advancement within 2 years. I think it's the average, at least in publicity. I think it's a little bit different in marketing because it's a lot more. I mean, editorial, sorry. But yeah, so I work with 2 managers, and I work with them on their titles, but then I'm also working on my own titles, which are like the smaller books that don't get as big of a media campaign, but it's great practice for entry level of just learning what a book publicity campaign is. So building your contacts, talking to authors, talking to editors, talking to their agents, and just like learning the brief, like the overall process. And then eventually I'll be applying all those skills to like a larger title that needs a lot more work. Oh, and I see a question. I should publish and distribute. I don't know if we have a quota we need to meet. I think the question was, Hachette publishes and distributes so many books. The imprints have to meet a central or certain quota each year. The only one I know for sure is 12, because their name is 12 and we got to get out 12 books a year. But besides that, I don't think that there is a quota. I just think our goal is to what is how many we can handle. I think an editor can be on from like 4 to 5 projects a season, and that's a lot. So I'm imagining that they just try to make sure like they give enough that we can handle is the quota.
There's also, it depends on the agent acquires. It's like how many books the agent acquires, and budget sort of factors in, like how much are we able to offer for an advance. So there's not a quota per se, there's a goal. Like with the imprint, they'll say we aim to publish 4 to 5 books per year, like, or per quarter or something, or 2 books a month or something. Like every imprint sort of has their goals, but there's not necessarily a quota because it is so in flux between like what editors are acquiring, what's on the market, what fits, what the media landscape looks like, etc. Timing, a lot of books, you might notice a lot of books come out in the fall. Like cookbooks tend to come out in the fall because people are sort of gearing up for Christmas, like the Christmas and the Hanukkah and etc. holidays. So it tends to be in flux.
Leah, do you want us to answer these questions in the chat now or continue with what we have and then answer? Because I feel like some of them will kind of come up as we go through our questions.
Yeah, I think we can wait. So I think we have 2 more questions that we had come up with. So we'll go through those, and then we can answer anything else in the chat. So if anyone else has other questions, feel free to post them in there, and we'll go through them. But yeah, the next question I had on here was if you guys want to talk a little bit about your favorite parts of your job, or maybe what the most challenging was, and if you have any favorite projects that you've worked on or anything you want to share. So whoever wants to start there.
Stephanie, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I can. I think the best part of my job is seeing, like, it sounds kind of corny, but seeing like the authors get so excited about their own work and seeing the editors get so excited about this, talking about like hopes and dreams with the editor, with the marketer, with the author and the agent. That's sort of the most exciting thing is when everything seems possible. Obviously the media landscape changes and everything is not possible necessarily, but in the moments when everything is possible and you are sending it out to media, when you have a lot of passion for what you do and you have a lot of passion for your projects, it's just so great to brainstorm ideas. So really just in the imagination of it all and like figuring out where a book would really fit, talking to media contacts, and they often share your excitement for your projects. The most challenging is definitely navigating the news, especially now that the news is like 24/7. We're constantly on social media and like CNN or Fox News or what have you. Like the news is 24/7, so it is a bit hard to sort of tie into those things and to sort of break out from the noise. But it's challenging, and yet it's exciting to see. Like I said, books bring people joy, so it is exciting to see what do people want to talk about, what will resonate with audiences. One of my favorite projects that I've worked on was at my previous job. I worked with Jodi Picoult, who I read religiously in high school, and I got to work on her book campaign for A Spark of Light, which was just, they say don't meet your heroes. If you have the chance, meet Jodi Picoult. She's one of the most lovely people you'll ever meet. And also working with Martha Stewart, that was like Martha V. Stewart, oh my God. And then coming to Hachette, like it's every single project has been sort of my favorite one because everyone at Hachette has just been so wonderful and so nice. Like I couldn't pinpoint just one. I worked on a photo book all about Joe Biden, and this was, when several of us were crossing our fingers, like I really hope that Joe Biden wins. I hope, like, having to pitch it as he might be the president, who knows? And then the excitement of, oh, I have several books under my couch that are just pictures of the president. Like, this is so exciting. But it's really fun to see books sort of tie into the current moment.
Yeah. I am like echoing everything that Stephanie says. I didn't get to work on a Joe Biden book, unfortunately, which I'm very jealous about. Um, I think, yeah, it's like some of the best part of the job is being able to come to our author and saying, like, look at this amazing review that you just got in Kirkus, or like this TV outlet, ABC News, wants to do an interview with you and put it on their channel. Like, that's always so exciting and so big for them because it's like huge. You get so much publicity for that, and that's our job. Um, but I think that's like the really fun part of our job. I think the most challenging is that every author comes to us with a set of expectations and we try our hardest to meet them, but every author thinks that their book is the best, and in their eyes it is. um, but not every single book is going to make the New York Times bestseller list, and we kind of have to be realistic about what kind of outlets are we going to be able to get for them. So I think that's the toughest part, is just navigating that and making sure that we are doing the best we can to meet the author's expectations, but also like realizing some of these expectations might be a little bit too high. Is one of the definitely the most difficult part. And sometimes it doesn't help because the editor will love the book because they acquired it and it's their passion and project too. And so we'll have an author and an editor who are like saying, we need to get on the Today Show and talk about this book. And we're going to be like, the Today Show is not quite interested. So that's always really, really hard. And then also, like Stephanie said, navigating media, we really have to be careful about what we're pitching. I think every publicist's worst nightmare, like I will wake up screaming from this, is having like one of our email pitches like screenshotted and put on Twitter saying, look at what this publicist sent me at this time. Like, I think worst nightmare possible. So just making sure so just making sure we're aware of what the news is, what's going on. And like, I'll just say, like, today I was supposed to send out a massive pitch for Irish Hanson's newest book, Bullet. But in light of the horror attack yesterday on Asian Americans and a mass shooting, like, is that really the best time to be sending to all the major media about a book called The Bullet? Like, probably not. And so like keeping and like knowing and being aware of the media's what it looks like and the temperament of everything is really important. And it's really hard because there's so much going on at all time, and just trying to be aware of it all at once is it's definitely really tough. Favorite project, again, like all our projects, they're so unique and so different. It's really hard to choose a favorite. I'll say one of like my favorite ones in the current moment is one that's still going on for me, is Naima Coster. She came out with a new book called What's Mine and Yours. And it's just been getting so much buzz. It's being like shown everywhere, and it's just so exciting to see it and like see all that hard work being paid off. We got, actually, I think the most exciting part about was a few months ago, we got news that it was going to be the new Jenna Bush pick. Jenna Bush book club pick. And so that was going to be big. Like, that's going to get picked up by like every single outlet possible. But keeping that a secret when we're pitching, so like, and just like going to a reporter saying, you should really, really read this book and write a review. Like, you're not going to regret it, because we can't tell them that in 2 months from now, it's going to be on the Today Show and being the new Jenna Bush book club pick. Wow, that is a tongue twister. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun, just seeing like this book everywhere. It's so rewarding. Thanks.
Then my final question for you guys, if you want to share. Weird echoing. Any advice for anyone interested in exploring careers in publishing, and if you think there's any specific skills that you recommend anyone starts building upon or anything like that? Stephanie, if you want to start.
Sure. My best advice for a career in publishing, aside from read everything you can get your hands on, don't limit yourself. I think if you ask somebody in publishing, what do you tend to read, they're going to say everything. I've been known to read everything from your literary fiction to your nerdy nonfiction to like sci-fi things to rom-coms. Read everything you can get your hands on, anything that sort of sounds interesting. Getting to know people in publishing, like just asking for their advice. like reaching out to Ivy or I, or like anybody in publishing, just sort of asking like, what do you enjoy about your job? What does your day-to-day look like? Staying passionate. Like Ivy and I both sort of had a challenge breaking into the publishing industry in the first place, but doing something that proves your interest, I guess, to the extent of like working with a bookseller, or doing book reviews or a book blog or Bookstagram or something that demonstrates your interest in publishing, so that we're not just sort of guessing at it. Telling me that your favorite book is 1984, like, okay, did you read that in high school, or is it really your favorite book? Tell me why. Being able in publicity, I think it obviously helps to be extroverted. It obviously helps to have great writing skills. When you're pitching, you sort of want to keep it short and to the point. When you're doing press releases, you want to tease out the story a little more of the book that you're selling, but keeping it interesting, and keeping it relevant. Other skills. Staying curious, I guess. I know that some people would say that's goes under advice, but I would say that's actually a skill. A lot of people aren't curious. A lot of people don't sort of indulge their curiosity, and like, I do a lot of like reading articles that sort of ties into going down the media rabbit hole and trying to find a journalist who would be really happy to talk about my book. But it is also very valuable to just know what other people are curious about, to know what people on not just social media, but in mainstream media are curious about.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, exactly what Stephanie says. Just being on top of everything is going to be hard, but doing your best will definitely help. I think my advice for if you want to go into publishing is definitely research the different opportunities. We've said it over and over again. There are more than just one department in publishing, and just like reaching out to people in the industry, like me and Stephanie. Like when I first moved to New York to work in publishing, I reached out to Stephanie and asked for an informational meeting, and she was great. And I think she was actually one of the first few people I talked to about publicity. I didn't even know anything about publicity until I talked to a couple of people, and I was like, oh, you know what? This actually might be something I'm interested in versus editorial. So learning about the different areas and seeing like what really fits for you is really, really helpful, because there's just so many different opportunities. Don't limit yourself and silo yourself into one thing. And then just things that are valuable, skills that are valuable. I mean, attention to detail, that's huge. And I'll just say specifically for publicity, because that's what I'm in, and I know like being shameless and being pushy is really important, because you will need to email someone like 15 times about a title before they respond to you, and just like being shameless enough to do it. So like, I'm so sorry to bother you for the 30th time, but are you interested in reviewing this book? Like, that's definitely important. Having some like strong writing skills, basic computer skills. I think one thing for me was really important was learn Microsoft Outlook. We live in our emails. Like I don't even know how long the workday is, 7 hours. I think 6 out of my 7 hours, I'm living in my email. And I think Furman, I'm pretty positive, gives everyone an Outlook account when you start. So I think that's what all students have. So take advantage of that, learn the ins and out of Outlook, and that's going to be a skill that every publishing company is going to like appreciate, because we all live in it. Let's see what else. I think that was it for me for that question.
Fantastic. Do you guys want to answer any of the questions in the chat if we didn't cover anything?
Sure, I can tackle the mainstream media question. Hachette actually made not just the publishing industry news. Around this time last year, Woody Allen came out with he wrote a memoir, and Hachette acquired it. There was a little bit of, I'll say, drama, just to skim over. There was a little bit of drama because his son, from whom he is estranged, is also published by actually Little Brown, who I work for. And that, I would say, is sort of some people would call it cancel culture, when really it comes down to a bit of a legal issue. We don't just acquire or not acquire books because somebody's been canceled. There has to be a very valid reason. And it's not just, if there's an audience for the book, people will acquire it. Hachette has imprints and several people who skew very liberal. Hachette has imprints and people who identify more as conservative. So any of the big 5 publishing companies, actually any publishing company, really does try to reach a wide audience. Nobody actually sets out to cancel anybody. Nobody actually sets out to exclude any voices. So mainstream media, I think, impacts what gets published to the extent that, like, what is in the editor's wheelhouse. If it's a more conservative imprint or a religious imprint or something, then that's the sort of stuff that they publish. I will say that if, like, let's say that you skew more conservative, if you feel that your voice is not heard, there are boutique imprints that publish exclusively conservative books. If you feel like you are very religious and you don't feel that your voice is being represented, there are religious imprints. It doesn't impact what we acquire. What is acquired is a number of very complicated factors. Only one of the 1,000 factors being media and potential media coverage. Another question from Mackenzie. Ties into something similar. It doesn't really tie into the content of the book. What the content of the book comes down to the editor and the author. That's a very unique conversation, which I couldn't speak to, but that's a very, I'll say intimate, like, conversation, because it is very much like the author's baby, and the editor plays a very big role in shepherding that into the world. So nothing is dictated. Like, we don't dictate what goes into somebody's book. We can strongly suggest maybe you should cut this. It doesn't tie into the book, or it seems extraneous, but we don't have a role in outright cutting something unless it becomes a legal issue. For many nonfiction books, we'll do what we call a legal read. And if it's something that could be labeled as like libel or slander or something, then yeah, that is maybe going to be cut out. But unless it's a legal issue, we don't have a hand in dictating what is or isn't published in a book.
I will jump in just to kind of talk about that also, because I think she also asked about how books are chosen in the editorial stage. When you choose a book, you have to keep in mind it's not going to be published for maybe about a year, because that's how long it takes to get the manuscript, to get it finished and worked on. So it's a huge part on the editors to be really in tune with what people are reading and knowing what's going to be still popular a year from now. And one of the things that publishing does do is we have these things called drop-in titles, and we have to always be ready for those. And that's going to be when something big happens in the market and you're like, we need to publish something relating to this topic right now. And so I'm sure you guys all know about the whole, I barely understand it, the financial district and the Bitcoin and GameStop, all that fun stuff, stock stuff. When that all happened, we got acquired and have a drop-in title called The Antisocial Network by Ben Mezrich. It's going to be talking all about that. And that came in like a couple months ago, and that's dropping in and publishing in a few months. Whereas that's called a drop-in title. Like that wasn't something that was anticipated last year, because this just happened like completely out of the blue. But trying to make sure that we are staying relevant is important. So some books that we published like very quickly are things that because we want to grab the opportunity as it comes up and make sure that we are filling a hole in the industry that isn't being filled. Let's see. So internship wise, do you need an internship to get a job in publishing? I think that's a hard one to answer, because it does definitely help having internship, because again, publishing is such a ground level up where you need to learn a lot to even get in the door. It's definitely helpful, but I think it's also helpful networking. So cold emailing people, like, do not be afraid of that. I sent out so many cold emails when I was applying for a job, and I did have internships, but they were with very small companies that were back home. So they weren't companies that when HR is looking at my resume, they're going to recognize, but I would send cold emails to hiring people and just like flag my name to like get my name out there. And I would ask people for just for not even interviews, but like just to talk about their job and like build connections. That really did help me. And like what Leah and Ashley said earlier, you don't need to come from like a publishing background, or you don't have to work in the newspaper or anything like that to get a job. I think skills are transferable. And when I was applying, a lot of the places I applied to were really curious about me working in a restaurant. My family owned a restaurant, so I've worked in one since I was like 14. So I talked about my experiences there, about being like on my feet all the time, like handling crises that happened like on the spur of the moment. Like they really liked that I know how to work under pressure. I know how to work with someone screaming in my face. Because you're in for a shot of reality in publishing. There will be people screaming in your faces. And so they were like, you have experience with that. Great. So yeah, just as long as you have like a willingness to learn, I think is the most important thing. It's just you're coming in and you're just willing to learn and put up with the work. How many people? So I see Nick put in another question about how many people review the manuscript during the acquisition process and before it gets accepted, and does the manuscript go in a board of editors? It does. Stephanie, I don't know if you guys sit in a lot of editorial acquisition meetings. We're starting to do that a little bit more at Grand Central, but when an editor finds a manuscript that they really, really like, their job is to like present it essentially to the room, and other people will weigh in. And in the room are usually the other editors, the marketing director, and then I think the publicity director are like the top people. And then they'll talk about the book, saying this book will do well with media because it's relevant topics. Marketing will be like, oh, we can come up with a lot of good ideas about this one right now. And then all these factors go into acquiring the book. But reviewing the manuscript itself, I think it's the editor who reads the manuscript, and then it's their job to promote it to essentially a board to get acquired. I think, at least that's what I've seen so far in Grand Central. Stephanie, I don't know how you guys do it in Little Brown. Could be different.
We also do a acquisition board meeting. And I would say the number of people who review a manuscript, it actually depends on the title. Sometimes the editor takes the meeting, typically like an agent will submit a manuscript to an editor. Essentially in a parallel to what Ivy and I do, the agent will sort of pitch a manuscript to the editor in the way that Ivy and I pitch a book to journalists. And the editor will sometimes set up a meeting if they're very interested in the book. Sometimes publicity and marketing is invited to those meetings. Sometimes it's just sort of an informal, just the editors taking the meeting. If it's a very large title, it usually moves very quickly. Like if it's Priyanka Chopra's memoir, it's probably going to move very quickly. So they're going to set up a lot of meetings and they're going to set them up very quickly. They sort of want to get the ball rolling. They'll take it to the acquisition board where the editor, the publicity team, the marketing team, often the publisher will be involved to some extent if it's one of the very large titles or a very buzzy title, all sort of backing the editor and the editor's vision for this book. If it's something smaller, if it's more of a quote unquote passion project, that doesn't necessarily have a big name attached to it or a big following, then it will be typically the editor pitching. Like, I think that sharks are the hot topic of 2021 because we haven't talked about a book about sharks in years. There hasn't been anything since '99, but Shark Week comes on every year. So this is ripe for possibilities. I actually read a proposal for a book that was all about the search for aliens. I'm not joking, the search for aliens. And it was actually one of the most fascinating things I've ever read. I happen to fear aliens out of respect, but that's a different topic for a different time. So it really is dependent on how the publisher feels about the project. Like if they sort of feel comfortable letting the editor take the reins and pitch it to the acquisition board. And it depends on how much we're trying, like how much we think that we could get this manuscript essentially. So it depends. In Little Brown, at least, potential acquisitions are sent to the full team, and everybody has the liberty of replying and adding comments and saying, oh, I loved this. Let me know if you get it. I read this and I didn't feel as passionate about it, or I don't think that it really has a market, et cetera, et cetera. So at least in Little Brown, everybody is at liberty to offer their thoughts on every proposal that comes through. How many manuscripts do editors read and present each month?
Before you continue, I do want to jump in. We are about 10 minutes over time, and I do want to be respectful of both you all's time, Dr. Oakes, and all of the students. So if there are any other questions, I know Leah and Ashley, you have your emails up there. Would it be acceptable for the students to reach out to you all directly?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Stephanie and Ivy, if you would like to drop your emails in the chat, if that's okay with you, we can absolutely do that as well.
Absolutely.
But thank you all so much for your time. If there's any last comments from Ashley or Leah, please feel free. But we really do appreciate you all taking the time to come talk to us, despite the hiccup with the timing earlier today.
No problem. It was great meeting you all. Thank you guys for coordinating, and we look forward to staying in touch with everyone.
Absolutely.
Hi, Dr. Oakes. Sorry, I was going to say that earlier. Good to see you.
And for the students, we do have this chat. We have been recording. Thank you all for coming. And we will be posting this on our website. We will also be providing the contact information should you just lose track of it. But otherwise, thank you all for coming, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.
Bye.